Okay, chapter 9 on intelligence. There are three modules in this chapter, module 26, module 27, and module 28. And in this chapter, we're going to talk about what intelligence is. We'll talk about how we go about measuring intelligence, various tests that are used. We'll also talk about the different intellectual abilities that individuals have, and we'll talk about some of the controversy that's also involved with intellectual testing and also intellectual abilities. And we'll also talk about some of the current laws that are in place for individuals who have intellectual abilities or disabilities. Okay, so let's start off with module 26. What is intelligence? There are two questions that we are going to answer in this module. The first question is, what are the different definitions and conceptions of intelligence? You would think that there would only be one definition, but there are different definitions for intelligence. And then the second question is, how do we go about measuring intelligence? So what are the tests that are involved? And what do those intelligence tests actually tell us? What are they actually measuring? Okay, so let's start off here just with a basic definition for intelligence. Intelligence is the capacity to understand the world, the capacity for you to think rationally and use resources effectively when you're faced with any sort of challenge. If you're able to do those things, then you could say that you're intelligent, but we have various levels of intelligence also. I think sometimes when people immediately hear the word intelligence, they think that you are really smart. But intelligence has many different levels, and we'll talk about that more in module 27 too, the intelligence variabilities that we have. Let's start off talking about the different theories of intelligence. And are there different kinds of intelligence? As you're going to find out here in just a minute, that we do have various theories stating that there are different types of intelligence. You may feel as though you are really smart in one area, but not so smart in another area. And so we do, I believe, and I do follow this, that there are different types of intelligence. There are some people who generally are intelligent in all different areas. But some people, are intelligent in one area and not so intelligent in another. All right, so the first type of intelligence, we have what's called a G or G factor. This is a single general factor for mental ability, and it is assumed to underlie intelligence. And this is what we saw in some really early theories of intelligence, that you have this overall general intelligence, that there are no specific types of intelligences. We also have two different types of intelligence. We have fluid intelligence and we have crystallized intelligence. First off, fluid intelligence. Fluid intelligence reflects the ability to think logically, reason abstractly, solve problems, and find patterns. So we tend to use fluid intelligence when we're trying to solve a personal problem or when we're trying to grapple with some sort of political issue. That is when you would deal with fluid intelligence. So can you think logically about this? Can you try to reason abstractly? Can you solve problems or find patterns within those problems? All right, so the other type besides fluid intelligence is we have crystallized intelligence. And this is your accumulation of information and knowledge and skills that you have learned across your lifetime through both experience and through education. And so with crystallized intelligence, you tend to think of people that are older, more so into their adulthood, because you're looking at the knowledge that they have accumulated within their lifetime. If you look at a child or a teenager or a young adult, they haven't had that many experiences and they haven't fully had their full education. So they're not going to have as much crystallized intelligence as an adult would. This crystallized intelligence reflects the facts that we have learned and the information that resides in our long-term memory. So again, that would make sense on why we see more adults, middle and older adulthood with crystallized intelligence. Still continuing on with these theories of intelligence, one theory is the theory of multiple intelligences. This was established by the psychologist Howard Gardner, and we call it Gardner's intelligence theory. And he proposed that there are 8 distinct spheres of intelligence, that there are 8 distinct different types of intelligence. And we'll talk more about those on the next slide then too, for what Gardner saw for that. He believed that each person has the same 8 kinds of intelligence. However, they have them in different degrees. So we all have these 8 intelligences. However, I may be high in bodily kinesthetic. However, you may be high in interpersonal intelligence, and I may not, right? So Gardner believed that we have these 8 different subsets or 8 different types of intelligence that everyone has. However, some people are stronger in one than the other. There may be more than 8, such as perhaps this 9th one, which is known as the existential intelligence, and that is believed to involve identifying and thinking about the fundamental question of human existence. What do you think that it means to be alive? What do you think it means whenever you're going to die, right? Some people have this existential intelligence. And this is a somewhat newer one. Again, this is not one of Gardner's original 8. This is more current in the research. All right, so this is figure 1, and this can be found. Do we have this one in a box? I thought we did, but perhaps not. These are the 8 different types of Gardner's intelligence. You can see them described on page 273 in your textbook. It's figure 1, but it looks a little bit different than what you see on this, is what you see in the book. It goes into a lot more detail. So these are the 8 different intelligences that Gardner believed everyone has. Musical intelligence. So you're skilled in tasks that involve music. Bodily kinesthetic. You're skilled in using your whole body or various portions of it in the solution to find a problem. So exemplified by dancers or athletes or actors or surgeons. Logical, mathematical. You're very good in problem solving and scientific thinking. Linguistic intelligence. You excel in the production and use of language. Spatial intelligence, spatial configurations, such as those used by artists and architects. You have interpersonal intelligence. That means that you are skilled in interacting with others. Intrapersonal intelligence, the knowledge of internal aspects of yourself and your access to your own feelings and emotions. So interpersonal would be you and others. Intrapersonal is you within yourself. And then the 8th one is this naturalist intelligence, that you're able to identify and classify patterns in nature. So Gardner again believed that all of us have all 8 of these. However, some of us excel more in one than in another. We also have this theory looking at the biological basis of intelligence. The biological basis of intelligence. We have brain scanning techniques that are used, and they have been able to identify that there are several areas in the brain that actually relate to intelligence. One of those areas is the lateral prefrontal cortex. And this area of the brain is critical to juggling many pieces of information simultaneously and solving new problems. So if you're someone who is very good at multitasking and you can have a lot on your plate at one point in time and do well with each of those things, then that would be that, your lateral prefrontal cortex is very much involved with that. Higher intelligence is related to the thickness of the cerebral cortex. The more thick your cerebral cortex is, the higher your intelligence is. The thinner your cerebral cortex is, the less intelligent you may be. We also want to look at the tasks that are required for different types of intelligences, right? We just talked about Gardner's 8 different types of intelligence. Each of those different types requires some sort of different task. And therefore, each of those tasks for each of those intelligences would involve different areas of the brain. So these suggest that there is this global workspace in your brain that organizes and coordinates all the different information. When we look at non-human animals, we find that animals that have an enriched environment and differences in their metabolism appear to be related to intelligence. So if you have a pet, let's say that you have a pet hamster or a pet gerbil, the more enriched environment those pets have, the higher their intelligence is going to be. It gives them more to do in their environment. It's going to make their brain work more, so to speak. The next thing I want to look at is the difference between practical and emotional intelligence. And this is going towards a more intelligent view of intelligence, right? We have this practical and emotional intelligence. So first off, for the practical intelligence, according to psychologist Robert Sternberg, intelligence is related to your overall success in living. That is practical intelligence. If you have lived a successful life, that's not always based on money though, right? But if you have lived a successful life in your surroundings, whatever that may be, then Robert Sternberg believed that you have this practical intelligence. And this could be with 2 different types of intelligence. One is analytical intelligence, and this focuses on the traditional types of problems that are measured in IQ tests. There's also creative intelligence. This involves the generation of novel ideas and products. Now, myself, I am probably more analytical than what I am creative. And you may remember me saying that in the previous chapter. I tend not to come up with too many novel ideas. I tend to go with what's already established. So I'm way more analytical than what I would be creative. That still says that I have this practical intelligence, though. The other type of intelligence is emotional intelligence. Now, for emotional intelligence, you have a set of skills that underlie the accurate assessment, the evaluation, the expression, and the regulation of emotions. I think I also have this emotional intelligence. I am very in touch with my emotions, and I'm very good about reading other people's emotions. I can evaluate those. I have no problem expressing my emotions. Regulating my emotions, that could be on a day-by-day basis depending on what we're talking about. But again, I think I have the analytical, practical intelligence, and I do feel as though I am somewhat have the emotional intelligence. This is a picture that is taken out of your textbook. This is on page 276. And it talks about in this picture, right, that most standard tests of intelligence primarily measure analytical skills. They don't measure too much of the creative skills, right? And so you can see in this type of intelligence test question. So you are given a map of an entertainment park. You walk from the lemonade stand to the computer games arcade. Your friend walks from the shooting gallery to the roller coaster. Which of these are you both most likely to pass? The merry-go-round, the pizza stand, the music hall, or the dog show? So this would be the type of analytical question you may have on an IQ test. So this isn't really looking too much at creativity. It's looking more at those standard types of questions. So again, you are at the lemonade stand, if I can find the lemonade stand. Okay, here we are. You're at the lemonade stand, and you need to go to the computer games arcade. Now, where is the computer games arcade? Okay, I see it over here. Your friend goes from the shooting gallery to the roller coaster. Which of these are you both most likely to pass? The merry-go-round, the music hall, the pizza stand, or the dog show? I would guess that it would be the dog show. See, but to me, it could also be the merry-go-round. Looking at that and seeing which one you are going to, which one you'd be more likely to pass. Okay, this slide is figure 3 in your textbook, and this is at the bottom of page 276. And this is just a table summarizing everything that we just talked about, right? Fluid versus crystallized intelligence, Gardner's 8 different forms of intelligence, and then the difference between practical intelligence and emotional intelligence, and the various characteristics that you would see with each of those. Okay, I want to switch gears a little bit and I want to talk about assessing intelligence. How is it that we go about determining someone's intelligence? Well, as you know, right, one of the main ways we do that is we use an intelligence test. And this is a test that is devised to quantify a person's level of intelligence. So quantify means that we are going to put a number to it. And that number then is going to be associated with a certain type of intelligence. And we'll talk about that later on, more so actually in, well, we may talk about a little bit here. I guess we'll talk about a little bit here, but then we'll talk about your intellectual disability also in module 27. Okay, now these intelligence tests, they have been proven to be of great benefit in identifying students in need of special attention in school. So intelligence tests are not a bad thing. They're very good for students who may need extra help. So they're going to identify that so that you get the extra help. They are also used in diagnosing specific learning disabilities, and they are helpful for people in making the best educational and vocational choices based on what that intelligence test tells you. However, their use has been proven to be very controversial. Now, Francis Galton, he was an English scientist, and he was the first one to put forth this completely erroneous belief, right? We don't believe this. But Galton was the first to put forth this belief that your head size and the shape of your head are related to intellectual performance, and that is based on his personal prejudices. All right? So he proposed this theory, this hypothesis, that the larger your head size and the certain type shape of your head proved that you had more intelligence. Now, we know this is not true. However, there was a big following for a while that looked at head size. What we follow more so now is the Stanford-Binet intelligence test. So, French psychologist Alfred Binet developed the first real intelligence test, and we call this the Stanford-Binet intelligence test. But it was originally developed by Alfred Binet. And he said that your intelligence takes into account both your mental age and your intelligence quotient, or your IQ. So your mental age is the age for which a given level of performance is average. You also, though, have to look at your chronological age. Your chronological age is how many years old you are. So you have two different ages. You have your chronological age, how old you are, and your mental age, that is your average given level of performance. Now, you take both your mental age and your chronological age, and you put that into an equation in order to actually find out your IQ. So the intelligence quotient, your IQ, takes into account your mental age and your chronological age. And it's used in an equation that looks like this. Mental age divided by chronological age times 100. That will give you your IQ score. And that is what Binet actually developed. Today we call it the Stanford-Binet intelligence scale. Now, this picture, this is a bell curve. Now, you may remember, you may have heard me mention this book, The Bell Curve, in the previous chapter on language, right? The bell curve shows that the majority of the scores are in the center, right? So the average IQ score is 100. And 68% of people score between 85 and 115. Then you have a few less people that score between 70 and 130, right? That's about 14% and 14%. And then you have even fewer 2% that are extremely low on their intelligence or extremely high on their intelligence. And then we have even a smaller percent that are under 55 or above 145. So this is what we call a bell curve. The majority of your scores are in the middle. Out of 100, the majority of the scores will fall into the center, 68%. Then you have 14% that are either below that or above that. You then have 2%, which are below 70 or above 130. And then you have 0.1% that are at 55 or 145. But again, the majority of the scores fall into the center. All right, I want to talk about some of the more contemporary IQ tests, right? And the first one is the Stanford-Binet intelligence scale. I mentioned the Binet previously, right? Alfred Binet developed the first real intelligence test, looking at mental age and chronological age in order to get your IQ. The more common, and this is through Stanford University also, the Stanford-Binet Intelligence Scale, it consists of a series of questions that vary according to the age of the person being tested. So you have a Stanford-Binet Intelligence Scale for children, and you have a Stanford-Binet Intelligence Scale for adults. And the questions are going to vary depending on what intelligence tests you are using for what age of the individuals are. The second type of intelligence test that we currently use in the United States is the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale in its 4th edition, and the Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Children in its 5th edition. So it's the WAIS-4 and the WISC-5. Both of these are very common in the United States. It's probably more common and more so used than the Stanford-Binet Intelligence Scale. The WAIS and the WISC measure 4 different things. They measure verbal comprehension, they measure perceptual reasoning, they measure working memory, and they measure processing speed. Now, you can look in your textbook on page 281, and you can see the types of, this is figure 5, you can see the types of items that are used on the WAIS-4. That's the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale in its 4th edition. Okay, and you can see the types of questions that are asked in that WAIS-4. I want to talk a little bit more about these 2 different tests, or 3 different tests, I guess you could say. The Stanford-Binet test, the WAIS-4, and the WISC-5. All of them require individualized administration. So it is not a group type of administration, like when you took your SATs or your ACTs. You may have gone to a certain place and you were in a room with a lot of different individuals and they handed out the test and you were able to take it. All 3 of these tests require individualized administration, not group administration. All of them are relatively difficult to administer and score on a large-scale basis. However, we also now have a number of IQ tests that allow group administration. These group administration tests offer fewer kinds of questions because it has to be set up so that it can be given to a large group of people. People may be less motivated to perform at their highest ability in a group setting. And I think if you're in an individual setting, you feel like someone is more so paying attention to you, right? Because it's a one-on-one type of situation. Whereas in a group type of situation, you're not so much individualized or sticking out. Also, the group administration IQ test cannot be administered in certain cases, such as in with people with unusually low IQs. So we have the Stanford-Binet, the WAIS-4, and the WISC-5. Those are all used in an individual setting, but we do have some more current ones that can be used in a group type of setting. Now, I want to switch gears a little bit, and I want to talk specifically about an IQ test, and why I wanted to discuss what we mean by reliability and what we mean by validity. reliability and validity. So first off, reliability is the consistency of a test in measuring what it is supposed to measure. If you give the test multiple times, you should get similar answers every time you give it. If so, then the test is reliable. If you don't, then it is not reliable. If you get different answers every time, then it's not reliable. Then when we talk about validity, it is the degree to which a test actually measures what it is supposed to measure. If it is measuring that, then the test is valid. If it does not, then it is not valid. So all of your tests, we're talking about IQ tests here, right, in this chapter or in this module, but you could be talking about any sort of test for any type of research that you would be giving, or any sort of test that you would be conducting. Your test always should be both reliable and valid. If it is taken multiple times, you should get similar results every time if it is reliable. If you get the answers you're looking for right, then it should be valid. So both of these are prerequisites for accurate assessment of intelligence. When we talk about norms, it is the standards of test performance that permit the comparison that one person gets for their score on a test with the score that other individuals who have taken the same test. You should have these norms. Tests for which there are norms are standardized tests. And the standardized tests are tests like the SAT, the GRE, the MCATs, the LSATs, the ACT. Those are standardized tests where there are these norms that you should find. Now, this is figure 5, and this is actually on, well, figure 5 is a little bit different in your book than what it shows on here. Figure 5, this is a table in your textbook. Figure 5 is on page 281. So it's a little bit different than what we have here. But in this one, this is a table just showing you the items. Well, it's similar to the one, I guess you could say, on page 281, but that actually is showing you different figures and the questions that would be asked. This table is showing you various examples. So information, the goal of the item is to assess general information, and the question may be, who wrote Tom Sawyer? Comprehension. Why is copper often used for electrical wires? Arithmetic. 3 women divided 18 golf balls equally among themselves. How many golf balls did each person receive? That should be 6 per person. Similarities. In what way are a circle and a triangle alike? So these would be the types of questions that you may find on the WACE 4. You can actually see those more clearly on page 281 also. Oh wait, that's on the next slide. So this is actually what you see on page 281. This is figure 5. So figuring weights. So the example is problems require test takers to determine which possibility balances the final scale. Matrix reasoning, the test taker must decide which of the 5 possibilities, replaces the question mark, and completes the sequence. And then the block design item is, it requires you to reproduce a design in a fixed amount of time. So again, this would be the type of question that you would see in the WASAR. All right, let's look at adaptive testing. This is the last slide in this module, and it is using computers to assess performance. What we see with adaptive testing is that not every test taker receives an identical set of questions, or every test taker receives different sets of test questions. The computer itself individualizes the test to the test taker. So this would be the type of GRE test that I took when I was applying to graduate school. I sat in front of a computer and the computer would give me a question. If I got that question correct, it would go on to a more difficult question. If I got the question wrong, it would go to a less difficult type of question. So I took it individualized by myself, but it was administered by a computer. So the advantages and disadvantages for adaptive testing. The advantage is that the total time spent on the test is shorter than what you would find on a traditional test. That's an advantage. I remember the first time that I took my SATs, I went into this large auditorium at a school in my hometown, and we had to be there by 7:30 a.m. and we did not get done until probably noon or 1 o'clock. So we're talking about a 4 or 5 hour test. That's a really long time to be sitting and taking a test. So the advantage of adaptive testing is that it is much shorter. The disadvantage is that a large number of the test items must be created and calibrated. So the early mistakes by the test taker can actually hurt their final score. Because if you get something wrong, you're going to go to an easier type of question. If you get that one wrong, you're going to go to an easier type of question. So it sounds like it could be good, but if you make a lot of those early mistakes, it's not actually a good thing.